Welcome to SaaS Unscripted, a podcast by Noble Recruitment. I'm your host, Nick van Eten, and in this podcast we will take a look behind the scenes of the SaaS world. Join us on a growth journey through stories, challenges and achievements of the people driving this industry forward. Get ready for SaaS Unscripted. Welcome to the show, Martijn. We've known each other for several years now, and I'm very excited to have you on this show. You have an incredible journey in the SaaS industry, from SDR up to CRO, and now even entrepreneur in the SaaS industry. So I'm very excited for the show today.
Cool, me too.
Hey, before we dive into your story now, can you tell us more about your youth? How did you grow up?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Friesland, and for the people that don't know what Friesland is, it's a tiny province of the Netherlands. I'm not sure how many people live there, but I think it's probably like 200,000 people or something. I grew up in two very small villages. One of them is probably like 500 people. The other one is probably like 5,000 people. So relatively quiet, easygoing life, I guess. I grew up only with my mom. So my parents divorced even before I was born. I grew up with my mom as a single child. So not a typical youth, I guess, but it was very easygoing. And around 18, I decided I've always had this passion for entrepreneurship and bigger cities. I was always traveling to like the bigger cities around where I was living. So when I was 18, I decided to make the leap and move to Amsterdam already and live by myself. But before that, it was relatively quiet upbringing.
Interesting. So basically, as a single kid with a single mom.
Yeah.
What were pivotal moments during that time that you decided to work in sales?
Yeah, it's funny. When I was a teen, I already quite quickly started working actually. So I think I was 13 when I started with my first like paper route. So I remember bringing around like these commercial folders door to door. And together with my mom, we would like pick up like 10 batches of folders, and then we all had to like fold them into like one package, and then I would bring them through the door. So I started working already relatively early on. After that, I've also worked as a dishwasher in a Mexican restaurant, for instance. One of the jobs that I actually really, really enjoyed because it was a lot of hard work, and I just put like the music on, and it was just 4 hours of hard work. And then afterwards, you would sit at the bar, have some Mexican food and have a beer. But what kind of leads me there is at some point when I was a student, in the place where I was born, you have a lot of like contact centers and call centers. And they're always looking for like young people to start working there. And I thought, okay, I'm not sure I'm good at it, but let's give it a try. And I just started working in sales there basically. So selling like energy subscriptions, SIM cards, lottery tickets, things like that. And one of the things that I really remember from that is that it would be like a software system that would make the calls for you. So it would be like an auto dialer. And you would call somebody, cold call, you would do your pitch, and either they would buy or not buy, they would hang up the phone. And then it was 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then the next call. And that for like 4 hours straight. That's I think where I really got into sales, because even there was like a culture which I really enjoyed with like a lot of young people, outgoing people. It was all around performance. It was all around like celebrating successes. I remember that if you would hit your target within 3 hours, you would get the last hour off basically. So very performance driven. And I really enjoyed that. So that was my first real sales experience, I guess. That also kind of led me to my first like professional sales job, so to say.
Lovely to hear that. So basically, you have a great story that you started to work very early. Was it 14?
Yeah.
So the paper round, dishwasher, working even in the factory. And how old were you when you worked in the call center?
I think I started doing that probably towards the end of high school. So probably like 16, 17, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always look for the best salespeople, and we see the call center experience is usually a very good starting point for any sales career. But you ticked all the boxes before you started in sales, basically.
Yeah, I guess it was kind of a traditional route, but it's funny because when I actually transitioned into like a sales role, which was at Meltwater, which we can talk a lot more about later as well. But I also made all the basic mistakes at Meltwater. So I thought, okay, this is really the same job that I did at the call center. So I'd make a lot of cold calls and just pitch. But nothing really converted to a client. So I actually had to learn to, ask really good questions, build rapport with your prospect and things like that. So I wasn't afraid to pick up the phone and make a lot of calls and have high output and high activity. But I definitely had to learn a lot about business to business sales, I guess.
And can you tell me about the time when you moved into that call center? Yeah, what from that experience do you still use, or what of those learnings do you still use today?
Interesting question. I think it's just the hard work or something, the desire to work and just work hard for something that you really want. I think too, maybe, I'm also not afraid to do the dirty work. I actually enjoy doing the dirty work. So my last job before I started FRANQ, I was the CRO of a 35 million ARR company. But I would still occasionally just clean up CRM or, build target account lists and things like that, because that's also still something that I enjoy. And I enjoy it again now that I'm trying to set up my own business, where I have to do exactly those same things again that, a BDR nowadays does or an account executive does. And I really enjoy that. So, I don't necessarily mind, or actually maybe even like, just doing the dirty work. I think those are, two things that I definitely take along with me. And maybe the third thing is really that I guess that passion for sales, but also what sales can bring to your own personal development and to your life. Because I truly believe that if you're able to sell things, it's even if you're an HR person or a product person, you also need to sell. You need to sell your ideas, you need to sell your thoughts, you need to convince other people. So I think those sales skills, I've just brought along as well with me, not only in professional life, but also in internal meetings or in personal situations sometimes as well. So I guess those three things.
Have you ever considered something else than sales?
Sometimes, and I guess everybody recognizes this, but sometimes, or maybe a lot of times, you have lows in sales as well. You have a couple of quarters where it doesn't work out, or there's this one deal that's not happening, or it's just not a lot of positive things happening, and then you start thinking, okay, should I potentially consider a career switch or something? It always kind of maybe creeps up in your mind. And then I'm thinking, what would give me, the same energy as sales does? And I can't really think of anything, to be honest. I mean, if it was anything, then, maybe I would, which is really closely tied, obviously, to sales, maybe customer success or anything like that. But I've just always really enjoyed sales. And, when you start thinking those thoughts, you also realize, okay, this is just a shitty period that I'm in. I need to work hard to kind of get out of this, because I really enjoy sales and, the successes that come with it. And, just focus on the basics again and make sure that I get out of this slump, basically.
You had it basically very clear at the early stage of your life that sales was a good match with, basically your personality, you as a person. How did you go into SaaS sales then? Like software sales?
Yeah, it was interesting because I just graduated. I think I was 22, and I'm not sure if they have these today, but at public transport stations, they would distribute Metro and Spits, these free newspapers. And I was always reading them because, I was traveling with public transport, as you do as a student. And then right around my graduation, I saw an advert in there, and it said International Management Traineeship. And I thought like, okay, ideally I maybe want to travel for a little bit because I hadn't traveled that much. I think I went to Turkey once with like a girlfriend that I had at the time, but I think that was all the traveling that I've ever did. So I thought, okay, let me just travel a little bit while I'm, still 22. But then I saw that advert and I thought, okay, international sounds interesting. Management sounds interesting. Traineeship sounds interesting. Let me just apply for that role. It was the only application that I actually did. And I think I got a call like either the same day or the next day. And I think they were quite far already in their recruiting process. And they said, okay, can you come by for an interview tomorrow in Amsterdam? And I was still living in Friesland, in the northern part of the Netherlands. And I thought, okay, why not? And then they said, yeah, the interview will be at the Amstel Hotel. And I thought, okay, wow, this is interesting. Why are you picking one of the most expensive hotels in Amsterdam to do this interview? And I walked in and there were like 20 or 30 other candidates there as well. And I thought, okay, interesting setting. And basically how they approached it was like a group interview setting. So you had to do all these kind of mini presentations and things like that. And then from that group interview of 30 people, they would pick like, I don't know, 6, 7 or 8 people for a second day interview, which was really a panel interview. So I think that day went quite okay because I got invited for the second day. And then the second day, you see all these, people in suits. They're all looking good, nice clothes on and things like that. And, you just graduated without 0 professional experience and they interview you. So it was a panel of 5 people in the Amstel Hotel. And I thought, okay, interesting. And did that interview. And then I think like the next day, they offered me a job. So within 3 days, I basically went from application to a job offer. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do now? And I thought, okay, let's just give it a try and see where it leads to. I loved Amsterdam already because, I visited Amsterdam many times before. And I thought, okay, interesting, let's move to Amsterdam and let's see where it leads to. If it doesn't work out, I can always go, either back home or go travel and things like that. And that's basically how I started working at Meltwater. And at the time, I think only maybe after like 3 years, I realized that Meltwater is a SaaS company. I didn't even know what SaaS was, basically. I don't think you had a lot of SaaS companies either in Amsterdam, or not that I was aware of. And we were just selling a product that people could access online, where they could just put in their username and their password and they get access to like a tool. But I didn't know it was SaaS or anything like that. So that's basically how I got into SaaS.
You started working in SaaS before it was cool, Martijn?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe it was cool. Maybe there were a lot of SaaS companies already, but I just didn't realize it. Yeah, I was 22 at the time. I've never heard of business to business software even, and let alone like software as a service. So I just thought it was a cool product. The company had a lot of success. It was an interesting career trajectory and more of the mindset. I wouldn't say it was impulsive, but it was kind of impulsive, I guess. Just made the decision, okay, let's give it a try. Let's move to Amsterdam and, let's find a place to live and let's start this job and see where it leads to.
Yeah, cool. And we all know where it led to. But looking back now with years of hiring manager experience, why do you think you were hired back then?
I think it kind of has to do with the previous experience that we talked about. I think they saw that for somebody that's 22, I would say that probably 90% of the people that they were interviewing didn't necessarily have any sales experience. That was also their strategy. They were looking for really good, talented, smart people. But sales experience was not necessarily a requirement. But I think it was a benefit for me. It was a plus for me. I think they saw somebody that was young and eager and driven and that was trying to sell himself, maybe not in the right way, but at least that they saw that. And I remember the hiring manager that hired me at the time at some point said, like, he's kind of like a diamond in the rough. Like, he's not great yet, but there's a lot of potential there. And we just need to shave like the edges off, basically. So, and I think that was true, actually. So, I think they just saw that.
So you did not even know that you were applying for a proper sales job then?
Not really. No, not really. I think I've only realized basically maybe in the second interview. And maybe only even, when I started working there. where, it was like a sales director coming from the UK, with a sales manager coming from the UK, setting up the office here. And, we're going through sales training. And that's where you realize, okay, this is actually going to be a sales role, which is fine because, I had that experience already. But I can imagine that maybe for a lot of people that didn't necessarily expect that, it was more of a challenge to kind of maybe accept that. Mm-hmm. And, it was also not like a how do I say it, is like a chill sales role where there was a lot of like business development going on, marketing going on, really like a traineeship where you get experience in different departments and things like that. No, it was really like, okay, you need to build a pipeline. This is your target this month. Next month, you have an even higher target. And in month 3, your target is going to be even higher. And this is what you need to do to get there, which basically involved a lot of cold calling. So yeah, that was, it was interesting. I mean, I didn't mind that. I actually liked it. But yeah, like I said, I think for a lot of other people, maybe it was a little bit, and I think they really learned from that as well. But it was, maybe not always what they expected.
It's interesting that you say that because you did not know where it was going to happen, basically. There are a lot of people that are graduating that want to go into like a commercial role into tech, usually.
Yeah.
Why should people that were, like, let's say the young Martijn Terpstra after graduation, why should people join SaaS sales as the first step as a career?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting things. I think if you're very commercially minded and, you like growing businesses and contributing to that in probably the most direct way, and really making an impact, basically, if that's important to you, then I think it's really interesting. Let's face it, I think, money is a part of it as well, where I think, salespeople, especially now, I mean, you'd be surprised what my salary was when I joined Meltwater, which is probably half of what a BDR salary is nowadays.
What was it?
I think it was, if I remember correctly, I think it was 24K per year. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, nowadays, and the salaries as well, obviously, even for really entry level positions, I think you can already get like a really good salary, which is kind of, the base that you live off. But then if you perform really well as well, you can, at least get half on top of it, sometimes even double on top of it if you're an entry level sales position. And that becomes only even more and more when you get promoted to like, an AE or an enterprise account executive or things like that. So yeah, I think if money, I wouldn't say drives you, but if that's important to you or you value that, then I think it's a really interesting position as well. And I think 3, it's also career growth. I don't think there's probably many other functions within like a SaaS organization specifically, or maybe even any organization, where you can, if you do well and you indicate that you want to make next steps and you're ambitious, where you can, make next steps really, really quickly. I mean, I've seen many people go from like, especially at Meltwater, but also at other companies, grow from like, being 22 or 23, just starting in a company, entry-level position, to being like a team lead, managing like 4 or 5 people after 1 year, to growing to a director role or a VP role like 3, 4, 5 years down the line. Like,
yeah, it can really kickstart your career, basically.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, can you expect the same in like a product team or in like a marketing role? Yeah, maybe. But I think because sales is so apparent when it comes to performance, that if your performance is really well, I think companies are more inclined to give you a promotion as well, because it's so clear if you're doing well or if you're not doing well. While in other roles, that might be different.
Hey, so we know now the early stage of your career. We know even what got you started into the SaaS sales industry. From that time after Meltwater, what were like the highlights of your career? What are the achievements that you are really proud of?
Yeah, I mean, at Inside It, for instance, Inside It was really like a company that only had Dutch customers, and I think the challenge was like, okay, how can we scale this internationally and go into different markets? Initially I did that within the European market, so really helped Inside It scale into other countries, basically. And I think by the end of 2 years, I think instead of only being in the Netherlands, we had customers in like 12 or 15 different countries. So that was a really exciting time. I think I was flying like once or twice every week to all kind of countries, basically doing sales presentations there. And occasionally, Wouter, the CTO, the co-founder, would join me as well. So that was a lot of fun. After that, we, or Inside It, raised a Series A. We used part of that money to also set up an office in New York. So I moved to New York to try to do the same thing there. Yeah, that was a fantastic experience, of course, as well. It was always one of my ambitions to also try to sell in America, because if you look at like sales, you feel like the Champions League is enterprise sales, but then also maybe enterprise sales in America. So that wasn't a very exciting thing to do. Then at some point I decided to move on from Inside It. But I think looking at Inside It, I think it was just really what you kind of expect of a startup, of an early stage startup. I think I joined when they were like 1 or 1.5 million ARR. Only, maybe a handful of customers in the Netherlands. And then, together with the rest of the team, we scaled it internationally to many more countries. Series A was raised, and you move to the US. It just, really, really exciting journey, especially when you're like, 27, 28.
So you moved when you were 28 to the US to set up a office in New York.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And besides work, how did your life look like? Did you have a girlfriend?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess 2 different girlfriends in my Inside It time. And then, with my current girlfriend, we actually moved together to New York, which was a fantastic experience. And luckily, she was also working at a company that made it easy to transfer to New York, because otherwise it's really difficult to kind of bring your partner as well, because, either you need to get married or, some company needs to sponsor a visa. But in this case, the company that she was working for was willing to do that. So that was great. Living in New York was just a fantastic experience. I mean, it's just that first year just... outside of work just feels like a big holiday, right? Where you're just, exploring everything. Like, normally you go on holiday and you want to explore everything. And now you're living in a big city where there's so much to do that, you can probably even if you spend a year there, you probably haven't seen everything that you're able to see. And it also gave us an opportunity to see more of America, California, the South. We went to kind of the northeastern part, to Canada and things like that. So it's just a really, really great adventure. One, professional adventure to set something up from scratch in like a completely new market with completely new circumstances as well. Other competitors, a different customer profile that you would go after, different type of people that are part of the team. I mean, Americans in many ways are different than Europeans, obviously. And then outside of that, it was also just, so that gave me a lot of energy. But then also outside of work gave me a lot of energy as well, because, just the energy that you feel in that city is just, fantastic, 24 hours a day.
Yeah, that's so cool that basically that you did not know where you signed up for when you joined the SaaS sales world, that you kickstarted your career basically, and you gained some international experience. Besides that, if I look at your career, you started as a BDR, moved into sales manager, VP sales, eventually CRO of a US company.
Yeah.
And now you started your own company.
Yeah.
So cool. So cool to learn from your growth journey. So with that experience, at multiple companies, do you have tips for BDRs that join a company, first step in their career, not happy, not making sales? I find it hard to experience that strong, high potential people stop after one bad experience.
Yeah.
Do you have tips what BDRs can do if the first step in their career does not work out?
Yeah. No, it is. It's tough. Like I said, and this is now like 15 years later, but I still remember those weeks where I felt like, okay, this sucks. Like other people are more successful than me, and I want to be as successful as that as well. And, I think there's a couple of things that I think that you need to do. I think one very important thing is you need to kind of create a plan, maybe together with your manager, if you have a good manager, how to kind of get out of this and not make it like very complex, but like what are the 1 or 2 things that we need to do now that will make the biggest impact? And I think when you're early on in your career, there's probably 10 or 15 things that you can improve on, maybe even more. But what are the 1 or 2 things that, will make such a big impact that, automatically results will kind of come in? And that could be around activity, but it could also be like, the way you build rapport with prospects, or the way that you do your messaging, or maybe try a different way of reaching out to prospects, or are you targeting the right people and the right accounts? Whatever it is, there's always like something that's going on that's maybe not necessarily going that well, and then consistently try to improve on that. Like, okay, if these are the 1 or 2 things that I need to improve on, really commit to that as well, and consistently over a couple of weeks or even a couple of months implement that. And, at some point, the results should, I wouldn't say automatically, but should definitely follow. And yeah, I think the other thing to realize is, and I've kind of realized that now as well, is that, motivation kind of comes and goes. You can't really influence it that much. Like sometimes you're just really motivated and eager, and sometimes you're not. But I think that the one thing that you can really influence is like, okay, what are my daily habits? As a BDR, at least I'm going to make sure that I reach out to X amount of people, or, have X amount of really good phone conversations, or, do X amount of like new tests with my messaging every week, whatever it is, just be very consistent with that, because at the end of the day, there's hundreds of thousands of BDRs across the world that are successful. And it's sort of like a science, I guess, right? There's just certain things that, you can do or you need to do in order to be successful in that role. So it's all about just figuring out what are those things for me to be successful in that role. And it's just a journey to kind of understand that. And I think that that's just important. Just realize like you can really be successful in this role, but you just need to figure out how that is and get help with that as well. And yeah, what I'm seeing now more and more, which is great, and you already see it a lot in the US, but it's all these kind of like communities, right? There's like the SDR newsletter, there's like BDR summits and BDR meetups. There's probably like previous BDRs in your current organization that are successful. There's probably like AEs in your organization that were a BDR before. What can you learn from them in terms of how they become successful? It doesn't necessarily mean that you will be successful then as well, but at least you can try and see whatever they did, if that will work for you as well.
Nice, great tips. So after 15 years of SaaS sales experience and having had several roles in the industry, you started your own company, FRANQ.
Yep.
At the moment, you are raising 2 small kids.
Yeah.
Great timing.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're 100% right. And I've thought about it for a long time, right? So I think I've always had this desire to be an entrepreneur, or to at least give that a chance and see if I can, build something from scratch, which is anyway something that I really enjoy. Also in those previous roles inside it, Folion, I wouldn't say it was scratch, but it was relatively, especially where they are now today, it's really kind of early stages. And I think I've always had that desire. So, my education was like small business and retail management, was focused a lot on like entrepreneurship as well. I told you the story about like, selling my mom's old stuff in front of the supermarket. That's also that entrepreneurial spirit that I think I had. And I think I just never really dared to do that in the past 15 years. My career was going quite well. And, I always had like maybe an excuse, okay, it's not the right timing, or I don't have a good idea, or whatever it is. And yeah, now recently, basically at the start of this year, I really thought about it and like, okay, what am I going to do next? And at some point I made the decision to most likely leave where I was, working at the time. And I thought like, okay, am I, going to do like another VP of sales or CRO role somewhere, which is definitely really exciting and interesting. But, it will likely be a commit of another 3, 4, 5, 6+ years. Or is now maybe the right time to give this a try? And yeah, whether it's the right timing or not, I think, maybe it never is. I'm also curious to hear your story because obviously you did it with Vladan as well. And I'm sure you had your doubts as well at the time, but yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's a situation where you have 2 young kids. We actually have a double mortgage now because, we're waiting for a new house to come up. So a lot of like expenses, you're looking for security, but I'm also still looking for like energy and what gives me energy and what gives me excitement. And yeah, this is what really gave me a lot of excitement now. And I'm not necessarily a very impulsive person. So of course I'm, really thinking things through like, okay, how much personal runway do I have? And how am I going to combine this with like family life? And, what is my girlfriend currently doing? And does it, fit with her ambitions and things like that as well? And yeah, I just thought about it for like 2, 3, 4 months, something like that. And yeah, just every time that I thought about it or was reading books around like entrepreneurs and how they started their business from scratch, it just gave me so much energy and just decided like, okay, fuck it. I just need to give this a try because otherwise I will probably regret it. And if it's not now, when is it then? Is it then when I'm like in my early 40s? Yeah, maybe you could still do it. But, to some extent, maybe it already feels kind of late to now do it when I'm 37. So I thought like, okay, let's give it a try now and see if we can, build something out of this. And that's how I kind of got to that decision, I guess.
Yeah, nice. So it was kind of building up for 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
But what was the moment that you really decided?
Yeah, really good question. I think there's like two moments. I think I'm not sure if people know this, but there's a Paris-based company called Lemlist, and their founder wrote a book on how he started his business and scaled it to like 50 million ARR. Really good book. It's called the 150 million exit, I think it's called. Really interesting book, and it just describes, the whole journey from starting it from scratch with like 0 experience to building a company that was at some point valued at like 150 million, and I think they're doing like 20 million ARR now. Reading that book on a plane, and I'm not sure where I was flying from. Maybe it was from US or whatever, but I read that book and that just gave me a lot of like goosebumps and energy. And then I had a couple of conversations with other people as well. And, they also asked me like really good questions around like, okay, but what are you feeling? And what really drives you? What gives you energy now? And yeah, I really thought like, this gives me a lot of energy. But it's also difficult at some point to kind of, and that's when you realize maybe in what a comfortable position you are to say goodbye to like, I wouldn't say goodbye to a career, but, say goodbye maybe for a little bit to that specific career, but also say goodbye to the security that you have around like salary and bonuses and things like that, and working hours maybe even, and kind of knowing exactly what to do versus, starting an own business. And now you're running into all kinds of situations where, you have never really experienced before. So, it was definitely a really tough decision. And whenever I make like a tough decision, it just, consumes my mind constantly. And I just knew at some point, like, okay, I just need to make a decision because it's just kind of getting ridiculous now. I can, probably think about this for another like 2 or 3 months, but I just need to make a decision now. And yeah, that's where I kind of make that decision and to do it.
On the plane?
I think that was definitely one of those like moments where I felt like, okay, I need to do this.
And how did the conversation go with your girlfriend?
We talked about it for months, obviously, as well. She's really supportive and really excited about that idea. So it was a relatively easy conversation. Of course, we had a lot of like conversations around like, okay, how we're going to do it in terms of costs and income and things like that. And just kind of came up with like a plan for that. And it's not like it's a one moment where you say, okay, we're now going to do it. It's more like a gradual moment towards that decision where you finally make the decision like, okay, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to do that.
Yeah, with a double mortgage and 2 kids. So
exactly. Yeah.
So you started for 24K per year at Meltwater.
Yeah.
And just to give aspiring SaaS salespeople an insight of salaries that you were on at your last company before you you founded FRANQ.
Yeah. It was a lot. It was close to 400K, including bonuses.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think I heard that correctly. So you started, you started your career at 24K annually.
Yeah.
15 years later, over 400K total compensation.
Yeah.
Should that also be a reason to go into SaaS sales?
Yeah, I mean, if that's important for you, absolutely. Like, maybe some people do, but I can't imagine you have a lifestyle where you need 400K. So that's also important. It's nice, but yeah, what it essentially meant, I was just saving a lot, right? So that also allows me now to kind of take this journey with FRANQ and start my own company because I have those savings. But yeah, absolutely. Like, I think there's a decent amount of people that also get into sales simply because they enjoy it. They enjoy doing it. They are very performance focused, but they also enjoy the benefits that come with it. Like, the monetary benefits, the status maybe that comes with it. There's a lot of companies that do like president club trips and things like that. So yeah, that is not for everybody, but I can definitely imagine for like aspiring salespeople or early in your career that is something that you want to do.
So yeah, it's a matter of flavor, what route you want to take.
Yeah.
But interesting, hearing that financial journey as well.
Yeah.
You're 5 months in as an entrepreneur in the SaaS world. What are the initial challenges you are facing?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's basically kind of going back to a certain extent to what I did when I was 22. Building target account lists, figuring out what is my ideal customer profile, booking meetings, having introductory conversations with people, tweaking my pitch, trying to provide value to potential customers and things like that. So it's a lot of like going back to the basics, I guess. And I think with like any company that's probably starting, you just, trying to figure out like, okay, what problems am I exactly solving and how I'm going to solve these problems for these companies. I think that's the essence of building a business.
What are those for FRANQ?
Yeah, I mean, the problem that I always saw as like a VP of sales or a CRO, especially when you have a larger team and you're not necessarily in every deal anymore. I think as a sales manager, when you have like 2 or 3 salespeople in your team, especially with later stage deals, you're always involved. So you understand why you're winning a deal or why you're losing a deal. But I'm speaking to many like VPs of sales, CCOs, CROs that, have teams of like 30, 40, 50, up to 100 people. And for them, it's a challenge, and for their company, it's a challenge to really understand, like, okay, why are we losing certain sales opportunities? Or why are we losing even certain customers in terms of churn? The information, if you want to answer that question, the information that you typically have is in the CRM, where it's like a drop-down menu with like maybe 8 options that was in there that was selected by the sales rep. And, maybe a short note that, gives a little bit more context around like why you picked that closed loss reason or that churn reason. But if you want to do an analysis and really understand like, okay, what are like the top 3 or 4 things why we're losing deals or why we're losing versus specific competitors or why we're losing in specific new markets or in specific segments, that is not enough information. That pivotal moment for me was actually my last company where, obviously the past couple of years have been a little bit more difficult for, SaaS companies. And we were seeing quite a lot of churn. And we just had no idea why we were doubling churn all of a sudden. And also, the information that we got from like the CRM or from the reps was also very unclear. So we decided to actually just set up like a win-loss program and really understand by speaking directly to buyers why they made the decision that they did and what were the key reasons for them to make that decision. And that just led to a lot of like interesting insights into like product, sales performance, in terms of like marketing and positioning and messaging, but also a lot of like competitive intelligence, like, why we're losing deals versus our main competitor. What are the key reasons for that? And that's when I thought like, okay, if my company is struggling with this, then a lot of other companies are probably kind of in the same boat. So a lot of conversations in my network, and yeah, indeed, like a large part of them said like, yeah, this is like a blind spot for us and we just don't know and would like to understand better. So that was also, of course, part of that decision to kind of start FRANQ, where I thought like, okay, that also gave me the confidence that, potentially this could be something.
You basically experienced that a lot of sales leaders had that same problem of the black box of lost opportunities.
Yeah.
And how's it going now for you?
Yeah. I mean, it's still early days. I mean, I think it's now 3.5 months. And there's really two things that I'm mainly focusing on. Is one, getting companies to experience what it is that I can do for them as a company. And two, when they commit to doing that, just making them very successful and giving them the insights that they feel like, okay, this is super valuable. We can't do without this. So those on a high level are really the two things that I'm focusing on. But yeah, it goes with ups and downs. Like, when you're a VP of sales or a chief revenue officer and you see like a new meeting coming in from a BDR, you're happy. But when you're a founder of a company and you see that first meeting coming in, you're jumping up and down the room again. Like like it's your first meeting that you booked as a BDR again. So yeah, it's also that energy and that excitement that is really cool. And those are then the highs. Or getting your first like pilot or your first trial or whatever it is, whatever small success it is that gets you very excited. But then there's a lot of lows as well, like people not responding to your messaging, or people saying this is not interesting at all, or we're doing something already like this, or just not getting enough traction, or in my situations, like the prospects or the customers of my customers not responding to my messaging, because I'm also dependent on them to have, interviews with me to understand like, okay, why did they make the decision that they make? It's tweaking messaging again. It's a lot of experimentation again. So yeah, whenever people say like entrepreneurship, and I'm sure you know this as well, is a roller coaster. And I always thought it like a cliche, but it is definitely true.
Yeah, the roller coaster doesn't get me sick again. No,
yeah,
it just goes up and down, but I'm used to it nowadays.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not necessarily used to that yet, because as a VP of sales, I wouldn't say it's steady. There's ups and downs as well, but it's the waves are less big basically. But as an entrepreneur, it feels like it's really big waves. Like it's because also at this phase, you're trying to prove if this works or not, and you want it to work. So it almost feels like it's your child race, basically, that you're raising.
Third child.
Yeah, your third child.
and now you're basically all the roles in one. You're BDR, your sales manager, your VP sales, client manager, all in one.
Yeah.
That's so this is your final destination.
Yeah, maybe. And also things that I really have to develop myself in, like I've always worked close with like marketing leaders or marketing teams, but now you have to do it yourself. What are you doing in terms of marketing? What decisions are you making? What experiments are you running? I remember doing like a Google Ads experiment to kind of see, okay, will this deliver any interesting inbound? Didn't really happen, and it spent like 2,000-3,000 euros on like Google Ads in like a period of like 6 weeks, and I thought like, okay, we need to stop this because it's delivering 0 results. And no, I'm going to a couple events now in the coming months, to try to experiment like, hey, is this working? And could this be a good way to kind of get in front of my audience and have really good quality conversations around this? So yeah, and maybe that's also one of the reasons that I decided to do this, where I felt like, okay, I need maybe something new to kind of develop myself again, and a new challenge and a new trigger. And even though it's sometimes really frustrating, when you kind of go across that hurdle and you understand new things that are working again, it's also really exciting again.
Cool. Yeah, very excited to hear all these things, Martijn. How did having kids impact your work-life balance?
Yeah. Good question. I always thought it wouldn't necessarily, but I definitely think it does. I think when you get kids and you also have a full-time job, when you don't have kids, you still have a lot of free time. Like, even though it might not necessarily feel like that, every evening you can kind of decide whatever you want to do, and during the weekends as well. That's not the case with kids anymore, because they consume your time, which is great. It gives me a lot of energy and it's a lot of fun to do. But yeah, they also consume your time. So you have less and less time for yourself. And yeah, I think in terms of work-life balance, you during the day can just really focus on work. But I want to, 90 or 95% of the time, I want to be at home when my kids are home as well. So I don't want to do much work things, especially, when it's necessary. Obviously, I will do that, but I will try to kind of plan around that. They typically go to bed at like 7 or 7:30. So then afterwards, I still have like 2.5 hours where I can spend on work stuff and things like that. So yeah, it's really kind of just planning around that a little bit, or, doing some work whenever, they're sleeping during the weekend. Maybe they're taking a nap from like 1 to 3 or something, where you pick up your laptop and you do some stuff. So yeah, it's whatever you prioritize. But for me, I really want to, really be involved and, be there when they're at home as well. So yeah, for me, it's then kind of, planning around that a little bit. But yeah, as a result of that, you have less and less time to really have time for yourself. So you really start to appreciate those moments when, you go out for dinner with your girlfriend or your partner, or, with friends or whatever it is. But yeah, those definitely become a little bit more scarce, I guess.
So now you made the decision to become an entrepreneur. What would you advice to aspiring entrepreneurs?
Yeah, interesting question. It's I can imagine, and it's funny, kind of making my own decision around this. You hear how many other people are actually thinking about maybe doing something for themselves as well. But it's I think a lot of people might want to do this, but don't necessarily take the step for like a lot of different reasons. And every situation is different. I mean, just look at, your and mine situation. I'm probably like 10 years later starting my entrepreneurial journey versus you. And you had different challenges to think of when you started, and maybe different doubts than I have nowadays. But so there will always be doubts, but just, for your personal situation, can you find a way where, instead of thinking, all of the things that might go wrong and why it wouldn't work, what are some of the things that why it would actually work, and what type of feeling and excitement and energy and pride would that give me, basically. So it's always, I think, and maybe this is me as a person, but I'm always also thinking about the worst case scenario, but I also think about like a best case scenario. Like, if I succeed with this, what would be so great about this, and what type of impact would that make on me and how I feel about these things. So I think that's very important. And I guess the second thing is maybe a very practical thing, but there's already a lot of things that you can do during your working career to kind of find out, like, okay, is this potentially a path for me? You can speak, let's say you have an idea, you can speak to, your potential market, your potential audience, or your prospects already. Kind of what I did as well at some point. Like, I was having like, a drink with like a VP of sales of like a big Amsterdam SaaS company, to kind of understand, hey, this pain that I had and this pain that I'm seeing, are you having that pain as well? And how important is it for you to kind of solve that problem? And what type of impact would that make on a business? And you can already have like 10 or 15 of those chats to give you even more security that this is your idea, something that might work. And then I think the third thing, also very practical, and that's why I kind of chose this route. I see FRANQ eventually as like a SaaS company, and where I think a lot of technology can help with whatever it is that I'm trying to solve for companies. But I've deliberately started as a service business, because it's just a very easy way to start, low cost. I mean, my business costs are quite low, basically.
Low?
Just a couple of €100 per month.
Yeah.
And then the biggest expense is actually the co-working space that I'm paying for. So it's just a very low cost, quick way to start, to have conversations around this proposition. And of course, your idea needs to be a decent fit for like a service model as well. But the downside of a service model is typically it's not very scalable.
Yeah.
But at this stage, it doesn't really matter. Just have conversations with people and try to prove value to them, even if it means that it requires a lot of like manual work. If you look at the manual work that I'm doing now for my customers, it's crazy. But it allows me to quickly understand what works, what doesn't work. It allows me to quickly test things in a very low cost and very efficient way versus what is the other route that I'm sometimes seeing, which I think, you're making a really big bet. You're trying to find a technical co-founder, or maybe you're trying to build like an MVP product. And I know people that do that, and it just costs like, 100, 200, 300K to build just an MVP type of product. And then, then they go to market, and then they realize that, okay, my audience might be expecting something else. And, they need to make like tweaks in their platform again, and then they go to market again. And I just think it's very important to just really quickly test your proposition in the market and see if you can get some customers on board where you can deliver a lot of value. But for you, it's just a low cost way and a quick and efficient way. And that's kind of my mindset now as well. I've got important goals for myself in that first year. If I don't achieve those goals, maybe it's a business that doesn't have a lot of potential. But at least I figured it out quite quickly in an efficient way.
A very good test year for you.
That's it, basically. Yeah.
But great tips, not only looking at what can go wrong, but what would be the situation? How would life look like when you succeed?
Yeah.
That's a very nice way to look at it.
Yeah.
And also, while you're still in your job, try to speak to as many ICP clients, prospects in that sense, to validate your idea. So that's also a great software mindset.
And I don't want to promote doing that during work hours, obviously. I mean, that's your own responsibility, but you can still meet up with people for lunch or, just quickly after work or whatever it is. So in my first weeks before I made that final decision, I just, I also had a goal for myself. Okay, I want to speak to 3 people that, probably will fit my target audience to understand. I was just inviting them for lunch or for a coffee or for a drink or whatever it was. And that really helped shaping the direction that I wanted to take.
Great. Yeah, I loved the conversation with you, Martijn. It's been an incredible journey of discovery today. Thank you for sharing your personal story in SaaS Unscripted. And thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks so much as well. It was a great experience. First time experience for me as well, but really enjoyed it. So thanks so much.
Yeah, lovely to hear that. Thanks for joining us on SaaS Unscripted. To explore the latest career opportunities, visit our website, noblerecruitment.com. And don't forget to subscribe and leave your review on your favorite podcast app. Until next time on SaaS Unscripted.